So, welcome to the Harsher Reality podcast. And today I'm absolutely delighted to have with me Hugh Brody, anthropologist, filmmaker, and author. I first discovered Hugh's work probably about 7 or 8 years ago, and his account of his adventures in the Arctic and his life with the people of the North, and it had a profound effect on me in my own inquiry into kind of what it means to be human and into the question of human nature itself. So I'm absolutely honored to have with me today Hugh Brody. Hugh, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here.
Great. So Hugh, I think it probably makes sense to kind of start at the beginning, so to speak. How did anthropology find you, and how did you find the Arctic?
Well, I think my adult life began in about 1966 when I was a graduate student at Oxford doing social philosophy and spending my time reading what somebody said about what someone else had written about what someone else had written, feeling frustrated, feeling I had reached some kind of cul-de-sac intellectually. And I happened to read a book by a man called Maurice O'Sullivan, which is a memoir about life on the Blasket Islands, in the southwest corner of Ireland, the book called 20 Years of Growing. And I read this book and suddenly I realized that what I wanted to do was listen to people telling their stories. I didn't want to be dealing in books or even in ideas, actually. I wanted just to be listening. So I didn't know that was the kind of the anthropological realization, but in retrospect, I can see that it was. So I changed my graduate work from theory to adventure, so to speak, and decided that I would set off to the west coast of Ireland and write about the relationship between capitalism and peasant life and the place of religion in that complicated encounter.
And this was 66.
And this was 1966,
Right.
yeah, spring of 1966. So I bought an old van for £25 that I found on a garage forecourt,
Right.
fitted it out to live in it. I had a girlfriend called Judith with me, and the two of us set off to the west of Ireland. And I spent several years as a result of that, thinking about travelling in and writing about peasant life in the west of Ireland. And as I was doing background reading for that, I was looking all the time for writing that focused on this encounter between modernity and other ways of life, or between capitalism and non-capitalist economies, and between living on the land and not living on the land.
Right.
And I happened to come across a whole body of work written by American sociologists on what they call the culture contact, that looked at Alaska and Greenland and parts of the Arctic. And somehow I realized that what I really wanted to do was not go to the west of Ireland, which was far too like what I knew already in a way, since it was agricultural and farms and within the tradition I'd grown up in it.
A settled way of living.
Yeah, a settled way of living, and within the Indo-European language family, and within the European colonial story. And although the west of Ireland is fascinatingly located in relation to that, it is absolutely part of the British colonial and the European cultural narrative. So I discovered these glimpses of the Arctic, and I thought, that's where I want to go. That's what I must do.
And that's where the journey began.
That's where the journey began. Well, the journey began sitting at a typewriter, writing out applications to people to fund me and let me get there. And it took months and months of writing and pestering and pleading to eventually get a chance to go to Canada. There was, in the 1960s, within the Canadian government, this unit called the Northern Science Research Group.
Right.
It's hard to imagine such a thing existing now. It was like a bunch of scholars within the bureaucracy.
Okay.
They had a little floor of their own and a little coffee room and a library and chairs where they sat around and talked. And this group, invited me to spend a few months living on Skid Row in Edmonton in central Canada. Nothing could be, in a way, further from the Arctic, you would think. And initially I said, no, I can't do that. I don't want to do a kind of urban anthropology. Wouldn't know where to begin. But somebody who heard that I was considering turning down this offer said to me, take it, because it'll lead to the Arctic. It will definitely lead to the Arctic.
Yeah.
So I took it, went to Edmonton, spent 5 months living on Skid Row, wrote about that, and then that led to the Northern Science Research Group boss, who was called Musker, saying to me, come to Ottawa, we want to talk to you about going to the Arctic. So suddenly the door opened and I ran through it. So the first thing I did when I got to the Arctic was start working on the language, Inuktitut. And it's anyone who has ever had a chance to learn a language that is not an Indo-European language as a speaker of an Indo-European language is in for an amazing journey.
Yes.
You discover there are whole other ways of representing and describing the world. So I started learning the language thanks to a man called Simon Anaviapik, who was an elder in the community of Pond Inlet, which is the place I decided I would spend my first extended period of time. So I did go for 6 weeks to a language school. The federal government of Canada at that time had an Inuktitut language school,
Yes.
where they would send people, some bureaucrats, some school teachers, for 3 or 4 weeks of immersion in the language. I went to that school where I acquired the basic grammatical principles, then went to Pond Inlet in the very far north tip of Baffin Island. And Anaviapik was an elder who I think had always wanted to take a white man into his world.
Right.
I think he wanted to reverse the colonial relationship.
Okay.
So he wanted to have somebody who would not know anything. All the white people who ever gone to the north really were traders, missionaries, policemen, government officials who were trying to tell the Inuit what to do, how to behave, what to believe, what to eat. And I think Anaviapik was one of the elders who had felt were oppressed by this without even knowing that's what he felt. But he wanted to reverse that relationship. And he saw this young Englishman who was saying, I just want to learn the language.
Probably for the first time, someone who was genuinely interested to be there and to learn and to immerse themselves.
Yes, I think it probably was very unusual at that time for someone like me to appear.
Yeah.
And my job, I should have said, my job description was to learn the languages.
Right.
To take as long as required to learn the languages in whatever part of the Arctic I wanted to travel.
And the intention presumably was to then for you to become a conduit in terms of relationships.
That's right. I think the theory was that the Canadian Department of Indian and Northern Affairs, as it was then called, would build up a little pool of people who knew about the Arctic in some detail, and they could advise on government policy. I think that was the vision. It all fell apart, as perhaps we shall see if we talk about the coming of the oil and gas industry to the north. But at that time, I was a rather unusual creature, and I often think of myself as deciding to become a child again.
Right.
But I knew nothing. In Anaviapik's house, in Anaviapik's world, on Anaviapik's land, I didn't know how to dress, to stay alive. I didn't know how to find my food. I didn't really know how to eat it.
Sure.
And I certainly didn't know how to speak.
Yes.
So Anaviapik was given to understand that what I wanted to learn was Inuktitut, which is the word for the language. And that breaks down to in the manner of the people. In the manner of the people is the word they use for the language. So Anaviapik said to me, well, come to me every day and I'll teach you. But you have to begin at 10 p.m., about around 10 at night time, and we will do the lessons through the night.
Is this has a relationship to do with the fact that the sun doesn't set? Or?
That's right. It was
Right.
24-hour daylight.
Yes.
And as soon as 24-hour daylight kicks in the high Arctic, the Inuit reverse their day.
Right.
They sleep in what we call the day, and they're up through the night. So they get up in the evening and go to bed in the morning. It's very, very fascinating. Hangover from life on the land
Yes.
and needing the ice to be as cold as possible. So he also arranged for me to stay in the house of one of his family members, like two houses away from his in the village, where they didn't speak any English at all.
Right.
And I would go every day to his house, and he would give me an Inuktitut lesson from 10 p.m. till 5 a.m. Well, they'd give me food and they would chat.
Yes.
And after a while, these lessons started to include going out on the land. So he'd send me out with one of his sons to hunt seals on the ice and send me out with someone else to go fishing. And then somebody else to take me walks under the tundra.
Wow.
And also I'm eating their food.
Yes.
And he would show me how to eat it. And he'd tell me how to talk to elders. So I got lessons in how to answer questions about myself. And this went on for months. And
It's
only
very
realized
immersive. It's
it was
very
very
immersive
It was
learning.
extraordinarily immersive. And sometimes the trips on the land were long, and sometimes a couple of weeks at a time.
Yeah.
And only in retrospect did I realize there had been a sort of misunderstanding. But I had thought I was asking to have language lessons, but he had thought I was asking to learn in the manner of the Inuit, Inuktitut.
Right.
So he taught me Inuktitut, how to be a person.
What struck you immediately, or not immediately, over time?
Well, what struck me over time was I was living in a place where there was complete equality. I think that was one of the first things that struck me.
Right.
That everybody in that community lived at the same material level.
Yes.
And that if somebody had surplus, some people, of course, were much more successful than others at whatever they did, whether it was hunting or fishing or trapping, and they would acquire pretty large surpluses. Immediately it was distributed. It was given away.
Right.
And people could come to a house and help themselves
Yes.
to surplus that was there.
Yes.
So I found myself in a society that was of equality. It was a society also without established hierarchy. So nobody had authority over anybody else.
Yes.
The only authority came from acknowledged expertise. So some people were recognized as being very, very good at something.
Yes.
And then that would give them a kind of authority that others would defer to it when it came to making decisions about where to go or what to do. But that authority was nothing to do with the kind of hierarchy I'd ever encountered. So egalitarianism was so deeply embedded in that culture.
And what do you think? Sometimes these questions, you have to forgive me, Hugh. What do you think makes that possible?
I'm not sure I know how to explain what made it possible. I can talk about why it was highly functional,
Okay, go
that
on.
it worked very well in an environment where you harvest the land, harvest the resources of the land, thanks to immense amounts of knowledge. So it's a knowledge economy. You can't make this place deliver the food that you live on
Yes.
without having a huge amount of knowledge. So the knowledge has to be pooled. Everybody needs to share knowledge. And I have to listen to you. When you come back from a hunting trip, I have to listen to you. And I understand from what you say more about decisions that I might have to make.
Right.
So the sharing of knowledge is a very important background to what's going on here. And also the unpredictability of the environment is another important factor here. So everybody knows that we're all doing the same thing. We're all trying to hunt for seals.
Yes.
So we spread out across the big area, conceptually, but actually often sometimes in fact, we're hunting in different places, and it's not predictable really which place is going to deliver the seals. So I might not get any, but you will. Somebody will of us.
Yeah.
This week it's me, and next week it's you. So it's obviously highly functional if I know I can eat your surplus and you can eat my surplus. It kind of ensures that the produce of the land is distributed evenly.
Yes.
Now, these are all kind of material, reductive ways of talking about it. What to experience it is to experience it as a matter of mind. It was so deeply embedded in people's mind, in people's consciousness, that you must be equal. If somebody asserted themselves, someone sought to have control, someone seemed to aspire to some kind of special status, they would immediately be pulled down.
Right.
And when the Europeans arrived, missionaries and traders, they of course wanted to have bosses, wanted to have leaders that they could negotiate with and deal with.
Yeah.
And they wanted to sort of raise up into the hierarchy that's in the European
So
mind.
they had something compatible to
That's right.
relate to.
Yep. And through whom they could deliver their orders, as it were, or their wishes could be made known. And the Inuit often talked about how those people would be ridiculed and shamed. And it's very fascinating in the literature to see how difficult it was for the colonists, the missionaries and the traders to find someone who would represent the people. It was so against their sense of what it means to be human. For them, what it meant to be human was to share, to be equal, and never to seek to control anybody else.
One of the things that struck me reading your books is that you use this phrase, egalitarian-individualism. So I wonder if you'd be able to share a little bit about what this looks like, the egalitarianism and the individualism, and how that kind of manifests in the way of living.
Well, the egalitarianism I've described, I mean, you can see it in front of you.
Yes.
You experience it in all aspects of everyday life.
Yes.
How people live, the clothes they wear, the equipment they have,
Yes.
the food they eat. The individualism is, of course, more difficult to describe, but it's evidenced in the extent to which each person seems to be making decisions for themselves. So if you're a family, there's a family unit. Within the family unit, somebody will say, I'm going to go hunting tomorrow for caribou. But they say that as an individual. They don't say, let's go hunting for caribou tomorrow. So the language of life is in the first person, singular. So I'm going to go hunting for caribou tomorrow.
Yes.
And they leave that in the air, as it were, that statement. And then somebody else might say, I might come with you. And then someone else might say, well, I might come with you. And then the first person might say, well, I'm going to go in the direction of such and such.
Yes.
And the second person might say, I think I'll go another direction.
Right.
And the third person will say, I'll come with you to such and such. And a plan is created for this caribou hunt, which does not have anybody ever say what we are going to do is.
And how many people are involved in such? Am I right in understanding that we're typically thinking of bands of sort of 15 to 20? I mean,
Yeah, small groups. I think, this has changed as a result of European interference, I suppose. But the pattern seemed to be for very small extended family groups in the spring to head out into their spring hunting areas, into different areas, and then through the summer to be in their small groups, and then also in the autumn. And these are all different hunting locations, and then the winter they converge into much larger groups. So the winter group would be 50 people, but the hunting groups around the year might be 5, might be 10, might be 15, and be very variable. And it's constantly reformulating.
And what you're saying, if I understand you, is that even within these smaller groups, there is no attempt to, right at the outset, unify, with a single strategy, so to speak.
Nobody would seek to impose a plan. And the plan emerges from individual decision-making and complete respect for each individual decision.
That's very, very interesting because, and of course, you are, you've spent a lot of time with hunter-gatherer communities all over the world. At the same time, you are very much sort of, how do I put it, of the modern world. Is it possible to draw a contrast between the individualism, the supposed individualism that we find here, which is maybe possible to consider it as a virtue in some respects maybe not, and the individualism we see, for example, with the Inuit?
Yeah, I think I use the expression egalitarian-individualism to characterize the kind of the mindset and the practice of Inuit and hunter-gatherers, but generally. I also like the expression hierarchical-individualism,
right,
which is our version, a sort of Western capitalist version of individualism, where the investment in individualism is all to do with advancing yourself above others. So the motive for individualism is hierarchical. So I'm going to do my best to get more than anyone else, or more than you, or more than others, or more than I have now, in order to climb up some imagined ladder of achievement. And this ladder of achievement might be power-driven, it might be wealth-driven, or both.
Yes.
But the whole mindset behind hierarchical individualism is to go upwards to more.
Yes.
And separating yourself, therefore, from those who fail to go upwards.
Yes.
So you have in your mind the idea that you must do better than yourself, than your neighbour, or perhaps more interestingly, you think your children must do better than you. Your children must be more successful than you. They must have more money or more status or more power than you. Always the notion of the individual project is tied to relative attainments as against and over and above others. And in the hunter-gatherer world, that is absolutely not the case. That the individual attainment does not seek to place you above others, either in wealth or in power. But the effectiveness of hunting turns on the informed individual decision-making.
Right, yes.
The thing I noticed most when I was first in the Arctic, and I never stopped thinking about it, was the way people raise their children. And the whole attitude to children illuminates what we've been talking about. So parents, perhaps I should begin by telling you that when a child is born, very soon after it's born, it's given what we would call a name. It's called an atak in Inuktitut.
Right.
And that's always translated as name. It doesn't really mean name. It means kind of essence or soul or spirit of somebody else. So the atak of a recently dead, much-loved relative is typically planted in the newborn child. So the child is both a newborn child and a recently dead, some societies they're still alive actually, some highly respected elder is also in the child.
Yes.
And when people address the child, they address it by the kinship term that relates to the elder within the child. So if the child has been named for a recently dead grandmother, the people who are that grandmother's grandchildren will call the child grandmother.
And this is the normal course of addressing? Or is it kind of interchangeable with the child's name?
Normal course of addressing.
Right, okay.
And some people will address their child as mother. because the child's been named for their
Sure.
mother
Yeah.
or cousin or even wife.
Right.
So the husband who lost his wife, the wife is then, as it were, reincarnated into the child. Will call the child wife. And they will also treat the child accordingly. So now, if the child is your grandmother,
Yeah.
you can't tell it to go to bed. You can't tell it to stop eating, or you can't discipline the child.
Yes.
Because the child is your grandmother. All you can do is endorse the child and express your affection for the child. So it's a child raising system in which the child is the authority on what it wants. So if the child says it wants to eat something, it's given it. If the child says it wants to go to bed, it goes to bed. If the child wants to go walking off, it goes walking off. Nobody would ever try and control the child other than to make sure it doesn't do something that's going to be dangerous. But even when they intervene with the child doing something that would be dangerous, I saw children pick up large hunting knives, small children pick up hunting knives,
Yes.
and someone would very gently put a hand out just to make sure the knife didn't cut its face. But it wouldn't take the knife away from the child. It wouldn't say, don't do that. So the children are brought up with a great sense of their place, their importance,
Yes.
their value, but they're not manipulated and controlled. So this is a society in which controlling others is not, absolutely not what you do.
And yet, so there's no imposition of adult will, let's say, on the child in what you're describing. Nevertheless, the children grow up to be, I don't know if well-adjusted is the right word, it's probably not the right phrase, to be part of the community in a way that works.
Yes, well, by being given the name of an important member of the community, they're right away they're integrated into the community.
Yeah.
And of course, there are very strong social values which the children imbibe. And if the children are difficult or breaking the rules, they're teased. There's a gentle teasing that goes on, that I think they probably feel deeply. So the children are being raised,
Yes.
but they're being raised by a different sort of method.
Yes.
And all the raising is to do with integration into the community, because they are, of course, at quite a young age, expected to take significant roles.
Right.
From 7, 8, 9 years old, they are participating in the economic life of the community.
Yeah.
And by the time they're 12 or 13, they can be quite significant figures in the economic life of the community. So this is a childhood that nobody's going to school. All education is by example and by practice. So you can see in this child-raising system a society which is dedicated to the strength of the individual, the valuing of the individual, and the placing of the individual inside a community and therefore inside a way of life.
Yes. In your books, you talk about, the hunter-gatherer way of life, and you contrast it with the way of the farmer. And I'm wondering if that dichotomy if now is a good moment to kind of go into that a little bit. Or
yes, I mean, the dichotomy, a farmer, hunter-gatherer, can easily be overstated, and there are all kinds of overlapping and mixed systems. But I think it's really useful to look at the way in which farming, agriculture, depends on changing the land. So a farmer looks at a piece of ground and thinks, how can I change this to make it productive? So you might want to cut down the trees, you might want to drain the swamp, you want to get all the stones out of the land, you want to plough it up, you have to get rid of all these things you call weeds, and then you plant your crops
Yes.
and harvest your produce from this land by transforming the land. So agriculture is dedicated to and dependent on changing the environment.
Yes.
Hunter-gatherer systems are committed to and dependent on not changing the environment. The environment has to stay the same because you have to know it. It has to be predictable. You have to know where the caribou are going to be in September. You have to know when the fish are going to come up, which part of the river, when. You have to know when the seals are going to start appearing in different parts of the new ice. And that has to be the same year after year after year, because the knowledge is the accumulation of an understanding of the patterns of the natural world. So the patterns of the natural world have to be reliable, which means things must stay the same. And that is exactly the opposite of what an agriculturalist does when thinking about and looking at the world.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting that there's no word that I could ever find in Inuktitut that could translate as weed or as vermin.
Right.
The idea that some plant might be not wanted and you should get rid of it, or that some animal is appalling to you and you have to exterminate it, it's completely alien to hunter-gatherer world, because everything that's there belongs there, and your job is to know it. And the more you know it, the more you can predict it, and the more you can predict it, the more successful your harvesting will be.
So it's a very intimate experience of being that, as you said, is seek knowing it, where they seek to know things as opposed to, I suppose, control, to control things. When I read The Other Side of Eden about 7 or 8 years ago, and you described this, it was a revelation to me, because I had been thinking about sort of psychological tendency to control, which I seem to observe in modernity, and been thinking about, okay, how far back does it go? Is it something inherent to the human condition? Probably, we are a complex-minded species, When did this insight first hit you?
Oh, I remember coming back from one of my first extended periods in the Arctic to visit my family in the north of England, my mother and others, and walking in the Derbyshire Hills and looking out across the countryside, beautiful countryside where I'd sort of grown up,
Yes.
which I loved, and my childhood was embedded in this countryside. I looked at it and I suddenly thought, this whole landscape is like it's caught in a net. It's trapped by transformation. Everything I look at here has changed. Is the changing of the world. These beautiful walls, these fields, these little copses of trees. Everything here has been made by agricultural effort.
Yeah.
And I realized I longed to be looking out at a landscape that I'd learned to enjoy and delight in the Arctic, where that is just not the case. You look across the land, and you don't look across it as wilderness. It's not the wild wilderness. It's a land that is known. So instead of being a grid of fields, that is culture, the grid of knowledge, that is the culture of the Arctic. And insofar as I had been able to internalize some of that knowledge, so I'd learned the names, I knew some of the trails, I knew the routes people traveled in order to hunt in different directions. I laid that grid on top of this landscape.
Yeah.
So it was my seeing the hunter-gatherer, understanding my little bit of that I could grasp, the hunter-gatherer understanding of land that made it live and beautiful.
Yes.
So I think it was that, if you ask me, when did I realize something huge was at issue here? It was actually going back from the Arctic and looking at farming. And also, remember, my first field work had been in the west of Ireland.
That's right.
Potato field, making ground grow potatoes. It's incredibly hard work. I'd done it. I'd worked alongside the people in the fields.
Yes.
Grueling hard work to change this land, this hard, wet, rocky land, into something that would grow potatoes by totally transforming it. And in the Arctic, where what you do is you go out, and there was none of that kind of grueling hard work. A different kind of hard work. Traveling on the land with dog teams is hard work, but it's a different kind of hard work. It's not that grueling hard work. So actually, I felt a sense of liberation.
And when you say it's not grueling hard work, I suppose for a lot of people, I mean, it doesn't look grueling to me at all. And other anthropologists, I think Daniel Everett, who lived with the Pitaha in the Amazon, he talks about this, and I think he said something to the effect of calling it work is not right, and it probably wouldn't fit. The activities are so deeply enjoyable, it probably wouldn't fit any modern notion of work. And when you look back on the experience of hunting, does it even make sense to think of it as work?
No, it doesn't. And in fact, the word for work in the Inuktitut language of North Baffin, pinaswaktok, he is working, actually means he is trying to do something. He is, trying to do something. So, that pinaswaktok could be just adapted to say he's trying for seals, he's trying for caribou. There isn't really a word for work.
Yes.
I don't think there's a concept of work.
It's just a way of living. It's just
what
what you do.
What you try to do is kill seals.
Yes.
What you try to do is catch fish.
Yes.
That's the job. Or what you have to do is take your dog team out.
Yes. And is it possible, and it's very, I mean, when I ask these questions, forgive me, sometimes they seem not very coherent. It's because I'm constantly second guessing myself about even the language I use, whether it makes sense to apply these notions when we think about a different way of being. So even the word enjoyment, I hesitate to use it, and yet I will ask the question, does it make sense? Is it possible to use phrases like enjoyment or immersion? What is the right way of understanding? Let's say, you said trying, they say, I'm trying for a seal, I'm trying. If it's not grueling, what is it? What do we call it?
Well, I think the Inuit call things easy or difficult.
Right.
Fun, not fun. I'm translating the concepts here. They're the words that people use a lot. So they'll be heading out into, a very big storm.
Yes.
Get trapped. I was once on a hunting trip where we were trapped and starving. I thought at one point we were not going to survive.
Yes.
We were trapped in really difficult circumstances. Our dogs were dying of starvation. Nobody ever said anything other than this is hard and there was not a grid of despair, struggle, fear, hope. That complex of terms are so important in our world view and in our everyday life. I thought missing, and I was struck again. In retrospect, I thought a lot about this trip when we had no food and we were starving.
Yeah, I remember.
And nobody ever said, "Oh my God, this is terrible." No one ever lost their cool. We just got on with it. And at one point on this journey, I remember the Anaviapik looking at me. We stopped and we brew up water and made us weak tea. It was all we had. We had been traveling for half a day across some long frozen fjord, and we stopped to have a brew up of this weak tea. And he looked at me and he looked into my eyes and he suddenly said, "You're so thin." And I looked at him and I saw his eyes were big and his face was sunk.
Yes.
And I suddenly realized we were starving.
Yeah.
But nobody had ever said, oh dear, we're starving." So enjoyment, non-enjoyment. I mean, you're trying to do what you do.
Yes.
And we were trying to get across this fjord, and we were trying to keep these dogs moving, and it's really hard to convey just how completely different
Yes.
the mindset is, and therefore the interpersonal behaviour.
Yes. Absolutely.
No one gets angry. I mean, to get angry is regarded as just a sign of being a child. Anger is childish. I remember to express anger is regarded as sort of pathetically regressive.
Right. So so anger is, and you talked about, I suppose to call it absence of fear would probably be very absence is probably too strong, but in a kind of recognition of the situation, and the fear may or may not have been there, but it's not drowning in it.
And not letting it get in your way. I mean, you've got to mobilize every last bit of energy and strength you've got.
Yes.
The one thing you don't want to be doing is panicking, feeling fear, getting angry with one another. Stay completely quietly focused on what you're trying to do.
Yes, and it's a fundamentally different way of being. And we were talking about, I think you mentioned in one of your books that you had this acronym HG and then PG for potato growers. It started as a joke, and that kind of led to the thinking. And I'm wondering how we can think about sort of the modern situation in relation to the PG, the agriculturalist settlement, and the hunter-gatherer way of life.
Well, I think my starting point would be child raising.
Yes.
I mean, I think that what my experience of hunter-gatherers in the Arctic, the subarctic, and other parts of the world revealed to me was how destructive our way of bringing up children is. That it's repressive, it's goal-oriented, so the child has to stop using a nappy by a certain age, it's got to stop wetting its bed by a certain age, it's got to start walking, it's got to start talking, and it's these steps of achievements, and that the child was under pressure to manage, and often in many cultures is punished for failing.
Yes.
To achieve these goals, as though the child's development is really in the hands of the controlling adults around it.
Yes.
I think that is incredibly destructive of human well-being, deeply destructive of human well-being.
Yeah.
And creates stress and disorder and complexes of pathology that then play out in our world and in many of our adult lives.
It's very interesting you mentioned complexes of pathology, because I know, because of the intervention of modern states, and people being forced off their land, and there have been a lot of psychological, really sad. It's a really, really, sad situation all across the world with indigenous communities that have happened because of the forced interventions of modern states. Bearing that in mind, which is I suppose a relatively new phenomena because of external pressure that has caused these psychological disturbances in these communities. Leaving that aside, is it because you went to the Arctic in the early 60s, and I suppose that was a time when forced settlements were beginning. I'm wondering if it's possible to make a comment or to look into the way of life, and to ask this question, or to see, well, did we find any of these ailments, the pathologies we have in modernity, before the kind of forced interventions in these communities?
Well, it used to strike me a lot when I was living in the Canadian Arctic,
Yes.
in both North Baffin and actually South Hudson's Bay, where I spent a lot of time on some islands, very remote place. But there was an absence of all the pathologies with which I was familiar. It seemed to be a society without the kind of neurosis that I was so familiar with in myself and those around me. So I think the hunter-gatherer way of raising children guarantees a very high level of mental well-being. The thing that transforms it all is, of course, colonialism and imperialism. The invasion of these people by colonial forces, the taking away of their land, telling them that they don't really have a right to their own land, telling them that their religions are wrong, insisting that they become Christians, making the children go to conventional schools, introducing the disciplines of modernity, introducing wage labour, and sending a message to these people that nothing that they have has real value.
Yes.
All the important things, all things that they should and now need to value, come from the South, from through the colonial frontiers, or from within capitalism, or from within a whole other socioeconomic and cultural order. This subverts people very, very profoundly. It also means in practice that many people feel that they have nothing to do that's worth anything.
Yes.
They are valueless. They don't contribute the food to the house anymore. That's bought in the store.
Yes.
They don't provide the clothing. Somebody buys that. They have to go out and earn money. They have to find money that can be converted into all the things that replaces what they were. This creates tremendous stress and distress, and creates levels of grief and dismay that are really, really profound. You throw alcohol into this mix.
Yes.
People are drinking, so people are desperate and pretty angry, really, though they don't express it very much in their everyday life. They drink, then everything comes out. The rage, the despair, and they become wildly disturbed and aggressive. So men pound the women in their lives.
Yeah.
They commit appalling sexual crimes. And so the children now, instead of growing up in a world where they are cared for and treated and respected as individuals who are somehow their grandparents, they have that. But on top of that is a sort of brutalization of violence. And violence comes in to the home. And that really got going about the time I was first in the late 60s, early 70s,
Yes.
through the 70s and 80s. And lo and behold, in the early 80s, suddenly there's a spate, an epidemic of suicides.
Wow.
Across the young people of the Arctic. So the Inuit went from being people who were, I would say, enjoying extraordinary mental health and remarkable integration and well-being, to becoming people who were self-harming and with the highest youth suicide rates the world had ever seen. No one had ever seen suicide rates that hit the Inuit of the Arctic. And then all across the north, and then in many other hunter-gatherer indigenous communities around the world, this same phenomenon played out.
Yes.
People went from being so profoundly well, so profoundly at ease in themselves,
Yes.
so profoundly at ease with and productive in relationship to their environment, to being people who are filled with self-loathing and a wish to die.
Yeah, and the very concept, the idea of suicide. I mean, we can't travel back in time and know for sure. From what you're saying, it seems like it's not something, when you think about the way of life and the mental well-being and the way of being, it's not something you would probably expect.
No, the anthropological evidence on the existence of suicide pre-colonial
Yes.
times is very fascinating. There was suicide,
Okay.
but it was highly ritualized. So in the shamanic worldview, the job was always to explain how things went wrong by reference to the spirit world. And of course, things did go wrong. I mean, the caribou didn't turn up, the seal failed, the fish didn't come, people starved. So the job of the shaman then would be to explain why this was happening.
Yes.
And sometimes someone would emerge in the community and say, this is happening because of me, because I have transgressed certain rules. It's my fault, as it were. My relationship with the spirit world has brought this upon us, so I must die. And they would ask to be killed. There's quite a lot of accounts of this across the Canadian Eastern Arctic and other parts of the North, where someone would say, I have to be killed in order for the misfortune that's at work upon us to stop. And that would be done always by strangulation.
Yes.
And they would often, the person who chose to die would select two individuals, often their closest relatives, to take two ends of a line and put it around their neck, and they would be throttled.
Yes.
Suicide is part of the culture. It figures in the history of the culture as far as we can tell.
Yes.
But it was never young people because they had lost the belief in themselves.
Yeah, and it's highly ritualized, and it's very difficult to do statistics on these things, but it seems like they're sort of exceptional situations. It's not like the caribou hunt every other day.
That's right.
Is
That's right. Very exceptional, and so exceptional as to be very remarkable. Whereas the youth suicide that we are seeing across the North is anything but exceptional.
Yes. So here I want to change tack a little bit. So James Woodburn, whom I'm sure you might even know personally, he makes a distinction between what he calls immediate return and delayed return societies, and where I guess hunting and foraging groups are immediate return because the fruits of one's labor are kind of generally enjoyed immediately. So this suggests a kind of very present moment orientation, and I wanted to get your thoughts on this, and really from there perhaps go on into whether this has implications for sense of self, ego, human ego, and relationship between self and other.
Yes, the James Woodburn model of immediate and delayed gratification, cultures that commit to delayed gratification depend on delayed gratification, and cultures that depend on immediate gratification. Of course, it's the same divide as between agriculturalists and hunter-gatherers. So agriculturalists delay gratification because it takes a long time between transforming the land and planting the seeds and actually being able to eat anything.
Yes.
Very, very long time. So you have to delay gratification. Agriculturists are committed to that sort of delay, and they develop cultures and systems for managing the delay. Hunter-gatherers, of course, they go out and they kill a seal, and they immediately eat it right there and then on the spot.
Yes, there may be a little bit of drying and
there could be quite a lot of drying, and sometimes if they've got lots of it, they'll cache it, they'll dig a hole, they'll excavate some rocks and put a pile of rocks over a carcass and then sort of hide it. And they do that with fish often too. So there is a delaying of gratification through that kind of preserving and storing. Wind drying fish is another version of that. But in principle, as soon as they harvest something, as soon as they kill something, they eat it. And the delay is only how long does it take them to manage to do that. And sometimes that delay can be longer than is easy to deal with, but that's nothing like the kind of delay that's built in the agricultural system.
Yes.
And that does connect up with all these issues of control, controlling of others, controlling of environment, controlling of oneself on the agricultural side, and the accepting that things are as they are. Our job is just to know them and to move around in our knowledge of them on the hunter-gatherer side.
Yes. And, one of the things I rewatched your fascinating documentary. I think was it from 77?
The 76, I think,
Inuit-
Disappearing World series.
Yeah, Inuit of Pond Inlet. And I was probably highly unsuccessfully trying to transport myself into, trying to dream my way into that world. And we talked about the egalitarian-individualism. I mean, the word individualism features with hunter-gatherer communities. When I reflect on this, and I think about how we are in modernity, and if I just throw in this phrase, human ego, how the reflective sense of self is another way of, I guess, a long-form description of the ego, self-image, how we see ourselves, how we project ourselves in the world. I wonder what your thoughts, if it's possible to comment on this, and possible to comment on the existence or non-existence or the extent to which this reflective sense of self might feature, or the degree to which it features. It must feature in some way. I mean, we're all human. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Yes, I think that the functioning of ego as if the idea of the ego is the idea that we are aware of ourselves and think of ourselves as important to ourselves, and that we know that other people see us as separate from themselves, I think that it is just as true in a hunter-gatherer world as in any other world.
Yes.
I think the differences all start to arrive when you look at what you think your ego entitles you to. I mean, that if you have a sense of yourself which entitles you to seek control over others, that what you want to do is expand your importance and your self-importance as an egoist, to use that term that's become pejorative, you wouldn't. I don't think that goes on in the mind of the ego of the hunter-gatherer. And the thing we haven't talked about is the huge importance of oral culture, that storytelling.
Yes.
Storytelling. So one of the things that very proud Inuit would do, or Danezau, or Hominisan, and people in the Kalahari I've worked with, but what people who think well of themselves would do will be to tell stories. They set themselves up as storytellers. And telling of stories, of course, is the passing of information and the sharing of moral views. And it is to take pleasure in your own articulacy and to enjoy your own experiences. And there is a very, very high value placed on storytelling, being a good speaker, an amusing speaker, an interesting speaker, an informed person. It's tremendously highly valued. So the ego in the hunter-gatherer world, I think, probably is inseparable from the sense of the self as a communicator, as a sharer of what you are, what you know. And that this is done with a sense that, of course, it's very gratifying to be highly esteemed as a storyteller, but you know that what you're doing is building the knowledge and the moral strengths of the people around you. You're passing on your wisdom to others, and that's the point.
And there's a highly relational quality. So, whether we call it the ego or whatever, it's not an isolationist, separationist. Sure. It is a highly relational connectedness, both to the environment and everything within it, which includes animals, humans or animals too, other animals, humans, plants,
That's right.
the ice.
Absolutely right. So therefore, the exercise of ego is integrating. Whereas in our kind of world, the exercise of ego is often disintegrating because you're opposing yourself to others. You're seeking to get some kind of advantage over others.
Yes. And Hugh, you talked about oral cultures, and there's this fascinating media theorist. I think it's from the '60s as well. You may have heard of him, Marshall McLuhan. He had this brilliant phrase. He said, "Writing gave tribal man an eye for a ear," and I think what he meant by that is that sort of when you look at a pre-literate oral culture and you suddenly introduce visual writing, it has a transformational effect on consciousness itself, potentially. So I know from your work that writing entered the North with the Inuit, for example, with the syllabics. And I'm wondering if you had any thoughts, and of course English later, right? With you. So writing entered in two ways: in the past through the Inuktitut syllabics, and then later with, of course, the imposition of English. I'm wondering if you had any thoughts on what the implication of the introduction of writing may have.
Yeah. It's very, very interesting the way writing came into the Arctic. Now, as you say, syllabics was the writing system that was developed by missionaries.
Yes.
But it wasn't developed for Inuktitut. It wasn't developed for Inuit. It was developed for northern Cree and Athabascan peoples, especially northern Cree in northern Arctic Quebec.
Right.
So they created a syllabic system whereby each syllable of the Algonquian language that these Cree spoke will be represented by one letter. And this was used for translating, for writing the Bible out in the Cree language and or bits of the Bible and the Book of Common Prayer. And the idea was that the Cree would become literate in order to be able to be better Christians.
Yes.
Now, the Inuit learned about this writing system indirectly. They didn't learn it directly from the missionaries. Right. They picked it up from the Cree, and then the missionaries found that the Inuit just loved this, and they adapted it to their own language, so each syllable of Inuktitut was given a symbol, and they wrote letters in it. Now, what the Inuit used it for was to communicate with one another, to write notes to one another. And when I first started learning Inuktitut in Pond Inlet, Anaviapik said to me, "It's very important that you learn to write syllabics well,
right?
Because you're going to leave. I'm going to get attached to you, and because you're a white man, you're going to leave. I know you're going to leave, and we're going to have to communicate. And this is how we're going to do it. We're going to do it by writing letters to each other in syllabics." So for him, and I think this is generalizable, I think for Inuit people generally, the great value of syllabics was to be able to write notes and send messages to one another. So it was a communicating system. It wasn't used for, it didn't displace the oral culture, therefore. It wasn't an alternative to oral culture.
It was an alternative, and it's again centered around, if I understand you, communication. Not quite storytelling, but it's in the general sphere.
Yeah, and people use syllabics a lot for keeping journals.
All right.
That's how keeping journals. And I remember Anaviapik for 1 year kept a journal that he would send to me so that I should keep in touch with his life. It's absolutely fascinating to read what he writes in the journal. It's just completely matter of fact. Yesterday I went seal hunting, we didn't get anything. Then we went fishing, we got 3 fish. A white person arrived in a plane. I'm going to go to church. I mean, it was little bulletins of information.
So no existential
No
crises,
crises, nothing about
pontificating.
nothing about feelings, nothing about how other people were doing, because you in those cultures you're very, very reluctant to talk about what other people do. That's for them to tell you. You talk about what you do and what you know. And so the writing was given a particular place. Now,
Yes.
subsequently, people have written extensive things in syllabics and whole books in syllabics, and there is a sort of literature small literature in syllabics, though in fact it was quite quickly replaced in many areas by Roman orthography. The Inuktitut was written in Roman orthography, which had always been the case in Greenland. They didn't use syllabic. And there is a literature in Inuktitut in Roman orthography more than in syllabic. So writing has come to have a place in the Inuit world that it has more similar to the place it has now world. But the important interpersonal, intellectual activity was storytelling, was speaking. And writing didn't displace that, although it did become accepted by news, by everyone.
Yes. And it's very interesting because when you think about, the extent to which, we as modern people are consumed by writing and the written word, it's a fairly new phenomenon when we think about the grand, in the grand scheme of things. And
The grand scheme of things is very, very new. And in fact, in the grand scheme of things, the whole agricultural system is very, very new. I mean, if you look at the plan, the long flow of what it is for Homo sapiens over the last, if we say 150,000 years, it's probably a lot more than that, but 150,000 years of being just like us.
Yeah.
Only the last 10,000 of that has been agriculture.
That's right.
And within agriculture, the writing is only a small fraction of that.
Yeah.
So it's only the very, very shallow, as it were, it's in historic terms, a very shallow surface of human history that writing appears on top of the relatively shallow surface of agriculture. But of course, it's not shallow in its consequences, just like agriculture has transformed the world because it's the underpinnings of colonialism, and writing has transformed the world because it has displaced oral culture.
When we think about, the hunter-gatherer, the way of life, in a sense, I mean, you call it the other side of Eden. It is, it is a way of life that is, in a sense, beautiful and in harmony. And yet, we, as a species, ended up where we are, embracing agriculture and these, I guess, settled ways of. I mean, I know the way I'm asking the question, I'm kind of pinning myself into a very materialist, structuralist corner. Is it possible to make a comment on it, to make sense of it? Is it, the evolution takes, they call it drift, right? Random events, and we end up in a particular place. And I sort of have this phrase I say in the story of humanity is a story of tools taking over its users. I wonder what your thoughts are on, where we ended up and what may have caused it.
Well, if I think about where we've ended up, because we haven't ended up, we're heading rapidly along somewhere where we might end up. We're in the middle of a very, very fast-moving process that seems to be continuous with the agricultural colonial story. So you throw in industrialization and then what's called advanced capitalism, but underneath it there are human beings who are hierarchical, seek control over one another, seek domination of the land, who produce too many children, so to speak, for the land base, so they're always looking for more land. There was the story of this advancing colonial frontier, and then at the same time within this agricultural paradigm there's the development warfare too.
Yes.
So we have selected in the last 10,000 years in favor of aggression, expansion, and violence has become endemic to what it means to be a modern human.
Yes.
Now, this is all very, you've talked about being too materialist and painting yourself in a corner. I'm being very reductionist and sort of a grand overview, and probably materialist too, but the way in which humanity absolutely has to look at this as a contingent matter.
Yes.
It's not natural. It's not that human beings, qua human beings, not that Homo sapiens is intrinsically violent or intrinsically committed to some kind of expansionist way of being or committed to warfare. These are contingent circumstances, and it's not human nature that's at work here.
That's right.
It's a particular kind of human history. If you want to know what human nature is like, you probably have to go behind this altogether. Though, as I think the young Marx said, and I completely agree with him, that the one notion we should get rid of is the notion of human nature, and then there isn't any such thing. It's always a construct. But the hunter-gatherer reality, which is the vast majority of human history,
Yes.
is not like that. I mean, of course it has violence, and there are people who kill one another, and there are cultures that expanded into one another's territories and so on, but it's not endemic. It's not built into who they are.
Yes.
And so if you want to know who human beings really are, you have to go behind this contingency of our time.
Yes.
Now, the trouble with that is it leaves us with nothing to say about our time. What are we going to do about where we are now? I mean, I think that's the most difficult question of all.
Yes, it certainly is. And it's perhaps a question we should go into, because the question is, when we look at this different way of being, what lessons do you feel, Hugh, are realistically portable to our situation today in modernity?
I think child raising, go back to that.
Right.
That is definitely portable. And the Swiss psychoanalyst Alice Miller has written wonderfully about this, about the way in which a particularly Germanic form of child raising created, in her view, the violence led to the extremes of the Nazi era and the mass murders of the Holocaust and the mass staffing of death camps. She links all that to child raising. We can look at the way we raise children and make that different, and we can certainly raise children who are a lot happier and better integrated. I mean, that's something that's available to us. The only other thing that's available to us, I think, is the critique of what's going on. So the model of imperial advance and settler colonialist advance is to say, that piece of land over there, we want it. And in order to justify our taking it, we say either there's nobody there, or the people who are there are inferior, they're second rate, or they're semi-human. And so the racism in which we use to demean other people is integral to the seizing of land. So we justify our taking of land by saying those people who are there don't really qualify for it. We then go to that land, and of course we come under attack from the people who are there. And because they attack us, we then say just shows how terrible they are, and so we will kill them all.
Yes.
That's the story of the settler colonial project. We see that playing out now. What's going on in the West Bank?
Absolutely.
What's going on in the West Bank? What's going on in Gaza?
Yes.
Now, so what's available to us is a critique. We can take the pattern of violence and dispossession that's been delivered to hunter-gatherer peoples around the world, to dispossess them, to deny them their rights to their lands, and use that critique to challenge what's taking place. Reversing it, can we reverse it? I don't know how you reverse it. but you can look at it as the story. If you look at America, if you look at the Canadian West, for example, the Northwest Coast, the place that that beautiful piece of art comes from ultimately. Their land and their rights was taken from them, their rights, their fishing was taken from them, their rights, their religion was taken from them.
Yeah.
But by recognizing that that's the story, by knowing that that's what's happened, you can start to see redress. You can say, okay, and go to them and say, listen, it's pretty terrible what's been done to you. We did it to you. Let's look at how to negotiate some recognition of that, some mitigation of it, and how can we give the understanding you have of the land a place in the way the land is managed now, in the future. Now, there are many parts of the world where that kind of discussion could happen. That could happen with Adivasi peoples in many parts of India. It could happen with peoples across Southern Africa, and it certainly could happen across the Americas. So, many parts of Australia.
And in my own, I'm Sri Lankan, with the Vanyala Atto.
Absolutely, yeah. Though, by understanding what's taken place, by seeing what the process has been whereby people have been dispossessed and oppressed, by acknowledging it, you can start to redress. And that's one way forward. Now, it's very difficult to achieve redress in a world where unbridled, late capitalist, so-called development is raging. It's not easy. I mean, the people in Alaska, I was recently talking to some people, some elders who live on the very north slope of Alaska.
Yes.
And they were saying that they are besieged now by the hydrocarbon industry. Every bit of their land is at risk from the oil and gas industry because the Trump administration has unleashed a new kind of wave of exploration and development in lands that were previously sealed off from development. So that's incredibly difficult to deal with. But by having a model of what's happened in mind, by knowing that colonialism and imperialism have advanced by demeaning people and destroying their relation to their land, by acknowledging that, you can start to push back.
Absolutely, and it's recognizing and critiquing this tendency, at least we find in modernity, to control, to dominate, to dispossess both others and ourselves, ultimately, from the environment. It seems like a good place to leave it. Hugh Brody, thank you so much. It's been a tremendous honor.
Well, thank you. Very, very, very pleasing for me and interesting for me. Thank you.
Thank you.